lesson, we're going to learn about premult and unmult in NUKE and how important they are for color correction workflows. Okay, so I have 3 images here that we're going to be working with. And just as a quick little preview for you, I'll go ahead and hook my viewer up to those. I've got a read node, which is my background. Another read of the RGB of this dragon with a little bit of motion blur, and then the alpha for that dragon. Now, if you're new to NUKE, you may wonder, why is the alpha red? If you know anything about alpha channels, you'd probably expect for that to be black and white. And generally, alpha channels are black and white, and they are used in NUKE the same way as far as how the black and white information is read. But depending on how something is rendered, if it's only been rendered as an alpha channel and just has the one channel and isn't rendered as an RGBA image, then the alpha channel just automatically gets dumped into the red channel because it's the first channel there. So if I come in here and I say I want to view my red channel, you can see that we do get that black and white information. If I go to my alpha, there's nothing there because it's in the red channel. So that's a quick little note about NUKE, and that it handles this maybe a little bit differently than what you might expect. It just is automatically dumping that alpha into the red. So keep that in mind as we continue to work through this tutorial. So premult and unmult nodes in NUKE. They can really sometimes be overlooked by beginners because the effects of using them or lack of using them can create other effects that may not seem to be too apparent until you get up really close or you make a really large change. Or if you do some other kind of maybe double premultiplication or something like that, then you can start to see certain little things, but to the untrained eye, it still kind of looks okay. So you need to be aware of these types of things and make sure that you aren't having these small mistakes come through into the final pieces of your work. So what is premultiplication? It's a term referring to the math that's happening behind the scenes when you're placing a foreground image over a background image. So that's what I want to do here. I want to place this dragon on top of this background image. Now, to be able to do this, normally in NUKE, I would use a merge node. So I'm going to hit the tab key and type in merge and drop that on so that my B pipe is going to my read node and my A pipe is going to my dragon's read node. Now you can see that we are getting a premultiplication around these edges here, but we're also getting it in some of the other areas. So the math is not working correctly right now. And I want to talk about why it looks like this before you add the alpha. So, and we're actually going to look over at the alpha kind of while we talk about this. And I'm going to look at it in just the black and white image here. So premultiplication, as I said, is getting that foreground image on top of your background image. Now, the key to that looking correct is that there is a third image present. That image is this alpha that we're seeing here. Now, the alpha image or alpha channel is made of black and white, and sometimes, in this case, you can see gray for semi-transparent areas. The totally black areas in an alpha channel are going to equal 0, and the white areas equal 1. This is a great thing about NUKE, is that it measures things from 0 to 1, and pretty much everything is measured on that scale, with 1 being the brightest white and 0 being the darkest black, within normal ranges at least. So in math, we know that 1 times any number equals the same number. 1 times 10 is 10. 1 times 5 is 5. It's the same number. There's no change. We also know that 0 times any number equals 0. 0 times 10 is 0. 0 times 5 is 0. 0 times 2 is 0. Everything is 0 if it's multiplied by 0. That's what we are always going to get. So with that in mind, if these colors have been assigned those values, that's where we start to get this math equation that happens whenever an image is merged with another image, and we get this premultiplication. So we're automatically going to get a premultiplication when we merge these together. It's just not going to be the right kind of math, because you can see he looks kind of semi-transparent. So if we're looking just at the RGB values here, what's happening is the black areas in this render of our dragon, they are becoming transparent. And the lighter areas, the closer to white areas, are still visible. So it's trying to use its own image to create this dragon for us. And that's not what we want. We want it to use the alpha channel to define that. So we need to use a shuffle copy node to bring this alpha channel into our calculation. So I'm going to hit the tab key and type in shuffle copy. And when you're using a shuffle copy, you'll want to plug the alpha into the 1 pipe and the 2 into your RGB. Now I'm going to hook my A pipe from the merge into the shuffle copy. Now you can see we didn't have a change yet because the shuffle copy by default is going to dump the alpha in here, but we know that our alpha is in the red channel, so I'm just going to move that over. And now we get the correct image. So what's happening here is that the white values of my alpha, when multiplied by my foreground image, I'm just going to kind of toggle back and forth between these two. The white values, or as you can see here, those red values, because we're dumping it into the alpha channel, are being multiplied by my foreground. They are preserving or not changing this area here where it's coinciding with the red. So it's preserving those to be fully opaque. Now the black values of my alpha, when overlapped with this area here, this black area outside of my dragon, those are going to equal 0, which makes them transparent. So now when I look at my merge, I have a transparent outside of the dragon, and any other areas that were black or not being poured into this alpha channel here. Rather, the R. So you can see that these areas right here are what we're seeing here. So this is pretty basic. This is compositing at the most basic of levels. But this operation, because it involves math, a lot of people really don't take the time to learn how it kind of affects things further down the line once you start doing things like color correction. And this is where things can start to get tricky. And understanding how it works behind the scenes, the way we just went through, is really going to help you understand why color correction can cause a breakdown in the way that it is causing that math to be calculated. So what I'm going to do is kind of scoot this over here, and we're going to add a grade node. So I'm going to hit the tab key and add this grade node in so I can do a little color correction. And the first thing I want to do is come in here and crank up that offset. So this is one of the telltale signs of something going wrong with your maths. The grade is affecting my background image before I ever even have really merged in with the background, because you can see this is before the merge. Now what's happening here is that whenever I look at this grade, I'm going to point to this, the black areas are being lightened. So these no longer equal 0. They equal some value between 0 and 1. So then whenever we come over here to this background and we put those on top, you can see that this gets all washed out. So whenever that's trying to pre-multiply on top of the background, it can't fully because the number is wrong. Now what we can do is basically hold this calculation off by adding an unpremult node before the grade. So I'm going to hit the tab key and add an unpremult. So you can see what happens here is it's saying don't pre-multiply this yet. We don't want to pre-multiply it because we are going to unpremultiply it, then color correct it, And then after the color correction, but before the merge, is where you want to add a Premult node. So now I'll put that in, and you can see that now my background is unaffected by that grade node. And that's what you want. You don't want your background to ever be affected by any color corrections you do to the foreground. Now, if I would have come in and just done a little bit of an offset, might not have been as noticeable. If I come in here and I disable both the Premult and Unpremult, this, you really can't see a huge change until you crank it way up. So you have to be careful that you don't make just some tiny little changes, not add your Premult and your Unpremult, and then you wind up with this issue. Now, another issue that people do sometimes, I'm going to crank that offset up again, is they only add a Premult after their color correction. So let's kind of see what the difference is, because this looks pretty good. It's not affecting my background. And my dragon himself, even though I have the gamma turned up way higher than I would normally want to, he looks pretty good. And no matter what I come in here and change or do, really, we get only a result on the foreground. We're not affecting the background at all. So I can kind of start to see an issue, though, if I get in a little bit closer, maybe like in this area here, or here, or especially in this area where it's semi-transparent. So let's see what is happening basically by pre-multiplying this twice, because it knows to pre-multiply it the first time. Then when we add another Premult node in, what we get is this area becomes darkened. So I'm going to add in my Unpremult and place that here, so you can see the difference. Major difference in that coloration there. If I select the Unpremult node and I disable it, you can see that there is a big difference in the darkness that we get in those areas there. And that is incorrect. You do not want that dark area to be a haloed around your image. So you want to make sure that you Unpremult, do your color correction, and then pre-multiply again. Now, I probably wouldn't want to do a color correction this crazy, so I'll go in and revert my knobs and maybe just do something a little bit more subtle. Maybe something just kind of like this. So very, very slight little changes. And maybe come in here and color pick my black and white point. Do something like that. Now that looks much better for him overall, and you can see how nice that looks with the Unpremult and the Premult. Now, you don't have to add these two nodes to get this same effect. It's easier for a beginner, as I'm showing you these two nodes here, and just use those. You can see the workflow. You can see kind of the flow of your node graph. But we actually have a control that will do this for us inside of the grade node. So I'm going to just X out of those Unpremult and Premult nodes, and I'm going to disable them. So we only have our grade, and I'll go ahead and turn the gamma up a little bit again, just so you can see that big issue we were getting with the background. And what you want to do is go into this little area here where it says Unpremult by, and just change that to your alpha. So that is telling it I want to unpremultiply and then premultiply, and that will give you the same result as leaving that at none and having both of those nodes there. So you can do either way, but you don't want to do both. You would just want to use both of these nodes or use neither and unpremult by your alpha. Either one of those will work. Now you can also have this option available with color correct. So instead of grade, you might be adding some sort of a color correct and put this in here, maybe say crank up your saturation or your gain, something like that. And I'll go ahead and fix that one, but you can see that my color correct might still be giving me some issue. So in my color correct node, you don't see one of those unpremult options on the color correct tab. You'll actually want to go into the ranges tab, and right here where you see unpremult by, you can choose alpha. and that's going to fix any issues you might get around the edge from a color correction. So now I've got both of those guys in there, and they're both being unpremultiplied and then premultiplied again after the color correction or grade. Now this color correct is a little out there, so I'm going to disable that, and let's just bring that back down so that we get a much nicer color on our gamma. Perfect. So hopefully that helps you with your color correction workflow, remembering to either unpremult within the node itself or add an unpremult node before your color correction and then premultiply again afterwards. Never premultiply twice, and make sure that you're fixing any kind of affectations of your background by using this special unpremult premultiplication workflow. So thank you so much for watching this tutorial on the Digital Tutors blog, and be sure to check back again for more free tutorials.